Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me and my distinguished guest, Dr. Carolyn Mazloomi. My name is Carolyn Shaw, and as you know, I'm doing a series of interviews with my friends, and in this case, one of my core mentors in the quilt world. I know people who have some fascinating stories to tell, and this is one of those stories. First, I'm going to read you Dr. Mazloomi's bio because she is such an accomplished person, and I don't want to leave anything out. So, historian, curator, author, lecturer, artist, mentor, founder, and facilitator. The remarkable and tireless Dr. Carolyn Mazloomi has left her mark on many lives. Trained as an aerospace engineer, Carolyn Mazloomi turned her sight and tireless efforts in the 1980s to bringing the many unrecognized contributions of African American quilt artists to the attention of the American people, as well as the international art communities. From the founding of the African American Quilt Guild of Los Angeles in 1981 to the 1985 founding of the Women of Color Quilters Network, Mazloomi has been at the forefront of educating the public about the diversity of interpretation, styles, and techniques among African American quilters, as well as educating a younger generation of African Americans about their own history through the quilts that the WCQN members create. A major force as an artist in her own right, Carolyn Mazloomi's quilts have been exhibited extensively in venues such as the Mint Museum, the American Folk Art Museum in New York City, the National Civil Rights Museum, the Museum of Art and Design, Wadsworth Atheneum Museum, and the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. Her pictorial narrative quilts make plain her personal themes of family life, women's rights, political freedom, and musical legacy. Her own quilts have been included in over 74 exhibits, and she has curated 21 and counting 21 extensive exhibits of quilts made by members of the Women of Color Quilters Network, many of them traveling exhibits that travel internationally. One of the exhibits she has curated is Still We Rise, Race, Culture, and Visual Conversations, which visually surveys over 400 years of African American history. It is the largest travel exhibit of African American quilts ever mounted. Dr. Mazloomi's quilts can be found in private collections around the world, as well as in distinguished museum collections here in the US. To date, Dr. Mazloomi has published 12 books highlighting African American made quilts. Her artistic work, as well as her defense of solid research, has disrupted some long-standing myths about African American quilts, myths that are much debated among quilt historians and quilters alike. Dr. Mazloomi has been the recipient of many state and national honors, among them the 2003 Ohio Heritage Fellowship Award, the first such award for any Ohio citizen. In 2014, she was named a National Heritage Fellow by the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the highest award given in the United States for traditional arts. And Dr. Mazloomi is the 2016 inductee to the Quilters Hall of Fame Museum. I wanted to take the time to read that introduction, that bio to you, because I know that many of us may have heard Dr. Mazloomi's name, may have seen one of her books, but few of us really know the extent to which she has contributed to this world we call quilting and to the arts. So with that, thank you, Carolyn, for being with me today. And I just
Thank
have
you
to
for
say,
having me. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Carolyn helped me launch my career. And I say that absolutely. She was one of the, no, she was probably the first person who came to me and said, Carol Shaw, you're doing something interesting here. You're doing something important, girl. You keep doing it. And oh, by the way, will you put this in my exhibit? Will you do this? Will you do that? She's always been pulling me in. So thank you for helping me develop into the artist that I am today. So with that,
And I shall keep pulling you in.
oh, thank you. We all need it. You have been such an important person in so many lives of African American art quilters. And I want to ask you, why? What started you off on this path?
Well, my objective in the founding of the Women of Color Quilters Network, foremost, and it's been at the center of my life, along with my family. The objective is finding a place in American quilt history for African American quilts. It's important for me that we be duly noted in that history insofar as our contributions. That can't be done without people seeing the work and about the work being documented through books and through film, and exhibitions. So this has formed the greater part of my life insofar as quilt making goes. Initially, too, when I started the network, before founding the network, there was a need to inform African American quilt makers not only about the cultural significance of the work they were making, but also the monetary value of that work. In my travels decades ago, I would go to art galleries, especially out on the East Coast, and I would see quilts made by African Americans selling for huge sums of money. And I wondered, gee, okay, is the quilt maker getting her fair share or his fair share of that money? And they were not. So there needed to be an organization to disseminate information about the value of that work and about the importance of that work to our own culture. So that has been my aim for the Women of Color Quilters Network. Early on, most of the scholars were white. Then along came Questa Benberry and Roland Freeman. But there was a lot of misinformation about what an African American quilt is. And most of that information fell towards, well, it leaned towards improvisational quilts. And that is so not true. The improvisational quilts are, that they took a small sampling, those early scholars, small sampling of quilts from the rural South that were utilitarian quilts, and just made that the definitive. That by no means defines who we are as quilt makers. The quilts in the African American community are just as diverse as we are a people within our own culture. So we're not limited to one style. There are quilts that are undistinguishable from white made quilts, okay, or anybody else's quilts. We're just no different. We are quilt makers that happen to be African American. Um, but early on, it was difficult for African Americans to participate in mainstream traditional quilt shows. First of all, we didn't belong to the average quilt guild because many members were reluctant to participate, or if they were in the South, they couldn't participate because all the guilds were white. Then when they did, when they were joining in, their quilts looked different from white people's quilts. Um, and they just had a hard time getting juried into shows. Well, to me, that's not fair. Um, we needed we needed a way to show these quilts to the public. The traditional method of showing quilts and quilt shows has never been, well, until lately, the vehicle for which African American quilts are shown. Thanks to Roland Freeman, African American quilts have mostly been shown in museums from day one. We have not had historically that many traveling shows, but the ones that we have been powerful and well attended and broken many records insofar as attendance at museums. So that to me is very important, that people see the work. And when it comes to the improvisational quilt, again, that's just one style within the entire body of works that we create. I find statistically, because we've had stats taken within the network, the majority of the quilters make pictorial quilts, narrative quilts. So that's been a mainstay for me. I love narrative quilts. And when I'm curating an exhibition, for the most part, there are mostly narrative quilts in there. Not saying that uh, modern quilts and patchwork quilts can't tell a story, because every quilt tells a story. But I sort of lean more towards the pictorial quilts. Guilty. Guilty.
I know what you mean, and yeah. But and so much of the history of African American people uh, has been lost, hidden, subverted, distorted. So those pictorial quilts are really critical, really
That's
critical.
true. And the artists, the quilt makers, they need a platform in which to uh, show their work, because showing that work, it makes the quilter grow. I have watched your own work evolve tremendously, okay, over the years. And I feel the more that work is shown and documented, it empowers the quilt maker to go on really to spectacular heights, spectacular heights, and yourself included. Um, I think every quilt maker goes through, professional quilt maker goes through a metamorphosis, as we should, okay, with our work. The work should evolve over the years, and you always try to find your artistic better self. And it's a continuing journey. But the artists need a platform. You can't just keep making the quilts and no one ever sees them. We want to see them. I want people to see them.
And we also need that critical feedback. I mean, beyond, oh my gosh, Carol, that's just so beautiful. Well, yeah. And what's working, what's not working, what's some dialogue that we need for those of us who want to pursue our own voice,
We have
regardless
to
of
be
style.
we have to be open to criticism.
Yeah.
You cannot be so thin-skinned that you're unaccepting of that criticism, because that critique makes you grow. It betters your work. You're going to go back to your studio and do one better and incorporate all those the advice that you got from the critique. So critiques only help. So an artist does themselves great disservice when they cannot accept criticism.
I want to talk about the Women of Color Quilters Network for a moment. You said you started that group as a way of supporting artists. What were some of the challenges and pushback you might have gotten at the time, and maybe still?
Well, gotten a lot of it's not easy. It's not easy starting what I call a grassroots organization. It takes somebody that's in passion, and maybe, and I find most people don't share your passion. So you become a force of one. It's very hard to find funding. It's extremely hard to find funding. In the nearly 40-year history of the network, we've only gotten 3 grants ever, but I could not let that stop me. We don't, I never asked for membership. I tried that once and it just, it didn't work.
I remember.
So yes, so I've underwritten the network myself. Because it's my passion. It's something that I feel that's necessary, and I could do that. So I fed my passion and I kept it afloat, because to me, historically, it was necessary. It was vitally necessary, because if I didn't do it, then I think who's going to do it? Roland Freeman, who mounted many great exhibitions, he is retired now and he's no longer doing that. So I feel that it's important that these exhibitions evolve from within the culture, because I feel that there's less bias. When I curate a show, I'm looking for quilts that really fit the theme and say what I'm looking to say. I'm not looking for the latest technique. Technique is wonderful. I advocate that all quilters know technique. But when I'm looking at my shows, I'm looking for a quilt that makes a statement. If the quilt doesn't fall apart during the travel of the show, it's okay. You passed the first test.
Right.
As long as that statement is made within the aesthetics of that quilt, I'm fine. I'm not so critical about looking for standard forms of workmanship.
Mhm, mhm.
As I said, as long as it's not falling apart and it looks good to me and it's saying what I wanted to say, it's fine. And I have to say, in all the exhibits, they've worked out just fine because they've been critically accepted and critically reviewed, and everything it has been great.
And that definitely makes your shows uh, an exception from the traditional approach, even in the modern quilt world, to selecting quilts for the show, for shows. Workmanship meaning precision piecing or whatever it might be, but
Right.
workmanship sometimes overshadows visual impact,
It
artistic
does
creativity,
something.
and so forth. Yeah,
Yes, it does.
yeah.
The quilts of G's Bend are a good example, you know. The, I can remember when those quilts first hit the scene, there was a lot of furor in the art quilt community because people saw those quilts as being raggedy and poorly made, and yeah, they were utilitarian quilts, but I mean, look at what
Yeah,
happened. They caused a quilt revolution.
right.
Yes,
They did, and
yes,
still are. They still are.
yes.
Um, the other piece that I wanted to ask you about was about the Women of Color Quilters Network members themselves. How how have they been able to support each other and yourself over the years? How has
Oh
that
my
changed or
gosh.
evolved?
Well, first of all, the core group, the core group of the network, we're very close. We're
Mhm.
like family. Seriously. My children and my grandchildren know certain members as their aunts, their grandmothers, okay? They're our family. They're our
Mhm.
family. I look at them no different. And I cannot picture them not in my life. I
Mm.
can't, nor can my family. Um, so the support is not only artistic support, okay, but it's spiritual support, family support. Uh, it's it transcends just quilt making, and that's the glue. That's the bond that keeps us together. We might not see each other except at receptions for our shows, but we keep in touch via phone and email and whatnot. So it transcends just quilt making.
Yeah.
That's important. That's very important for me, anyway.
And especially, as you mentioned earlier, many of the members may have joined predominantly white quilt groups, formal and informal groups, and not felt a level of encouragement and acceptance for the way they were working, the
Yes,
colors and fabrics and so forth. And, you know, that is changing to a degree. But I hear quilters today talk about having those experiences. So,
yes.
what's your feeling about that? What's your take on that?
I don't I don't think about it. I
Mhm.
don't think about it because I'm in my own realm here with the network. Um, but you can always come home. I say it like that.
Right.
You can always come home.
Mhm.
Um, but still, too, all these experiences are necessary for growth,
Mhm.
especially especially for the professional quilt maker or the person that wants to make this a career. Every activity is a moment for growth.
Mhm.
So being in quilt guilds where you're the minority, it is still, to me, it can be a learning experience.
Mhm.
You have opportunities to have, attend workshops and, see the way others work. So that all contributes to your quilt making because you take it in. Well, you should take it in and uh, see what you can get from it, and
Yeah.
yeah, incorporate it into your work. So you don't lose anything. You might be a little miserable and uncomfortable, but you don't lose
Yeah.
anything.
Or another experience people African American quilters talk about is they feel like they're the ones sharing information, teaching others about, name it, fill in the blank, and not getting as much back.
Well, I have to say, we all know as African Americans set the pace for art, for fashion, for
Yeah,
music,
true.
yeah, everything. Other people might not acknowledge that, but it's true. So I don't know what to say about that. We're givers. We are givers, and
Yeah,
yes,
we are.
and other people take. So
Yeah,
we know that. We
yeah.
know that.
And it's important to manage our own energy around how
It
much we want to
is.
do that.
Yeah, it is. And this is another thing too that I'm involved in. I'm involved in the collecting of quilts. And I always advocate that we as quilt makers, you have to leave something behind for your family. You have to leave something behind for your culture. People from outside our culture have long known the artistic merits of what Black folk create, whether it be African Americans or Africans, because we are not the main collectors of our own work. I don't care what the medium is, it doesn't make any difference. We are not the main collectors. As far as I know, there are only 2 African American quilt collectors in the country with large collections. That's myself and Roland Freeman. So the vast collections are outside of the community, and that quilts are just an example, okay, of many artistic works and mediums. You have to leave something behind within the community, especially for your family. And now, at this point in my career and in my life, I am thinking about legacy. And had we not had a problem with COVID, I would be traveling the country because I made a mandate for myself to travel the country and offer free of cost lectures and workshops about legacy. What are we leaving? How are we leaving? And who are we leaving to our work? We have to know how to manage. And I've seen it time and time again where important African American scholars and collectors have passed away and left no will. I don't know where their quilts are. They have made no provisions for their quilts, their scholarly papers. So sometimes we're laxed about taking care of business, and now is not the time, because always there are people waiting to take advantage.
Right.
And that's wrong. You don't want the work, your hard work that you worked for decades creating, to just vanish and disappear. And your family, your relatives, or the institutions that you love and care about have nothing. So we have to make proper arrangements to take care of our work. And then when we're creating the work, we have to know how to take care of it and label it and catalog it. And we have to be careful about those things. The labeling and appraising and documenting should be something that every quilt maker should be doing.
So how do we make sure we're getting these messages to younger African American quilt makers?
That
'Cause
has
they're out
been
there.
that has been very difficult. Okay,
Mhm.
when you talk about young African American quilt makers, you're talking about a very, very scant few of people. I hate to admit we've not been successful at teaching young people
Mhm.
quilting because they of lack of interest.
Yeah.
Most young people don't want to be bothered with something that they see so slow and tedious and time consuming and painstaking, especially in this world of you know uh, instant gratification
Right.
and computers and whatnot. It's
Right.
hard. It's
Mhm.
hard. But we have certain members that have um, youth classes that they've been teaching now for over 25 years. But that's a small, very small entity. We could do more if we had funding to do it,
Mhm.
but unfortunately, have we don't have that kind of
Right.
funding.
Where I've seen small numbers of African American quilt makers show up, they're usually art students that are fortunate enough to have some sort of textile, you know, people in the art school. And that's dwindling, the number of textile
Yes,
programs.
yes,
But that's where I've seen, when I say younger, I mean people in their 20s who are finding this new way of expression. And they're usually doing, many of them are doing more pictorial or story quilt kinds of approaches.
hmm
But,
yes, yes,
but we shall
yes.
see. Maybe uh, some of us will continue to document and publish. I'm also seeing some of the, my generation, our generation, African American quilters self-publishing now,
Which is
documenting their
great,
work.
which is great, which
Yeah.
is great. And Kyra Hicks has
Hmm.
been a main proponent of that
Yeah.
self-publishing. So,
Hmm.
I thank her for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, so I want to switch to your work as an artist. And we have some images to show, but before I show those, here's my basic question. How do you make time to make your own work?
There is no time. Unfortunately, I don't get a lot of studio time
Mhm.
because curating and writing books, it's it sucks up all my
Yeah.
energy and all of my time. So that's another goal if I'm fortunate to live long enough. I want to have more studio time because
Mhm.
I enjoy quilting. It's
Yeah.
just that I'm not afforded that much time to do so. So hopefully in the future I'll have more time.
Well, this year I thought I'd have a lot of time and I've been doing a lot of teaching, but I have resolved that I will be making more time for making
And
going
see, I
forward.
always say there's no such thing as a superwoman.
Yeah.
You can't do it all,
No.
okay? Um, you're showing a quilt of mine. I love to use my grandchildren as subjects of my quilts. So the first quilt that you showed, uh, can we go back to the first quilt?
Actually, that one was further
Okay, okay.
along. So this is
Oh,
the
okay,
first one in the
okay.
slideshow. Sorry. That
Oh,
was,
okay. Well, I like to do quilts about social and political issues and issues that affect women. This particular quilt is about race
I'm
reconciliation and
I'm
just
sorry,
race.
Carolyn. The quilt that should be showing on the screen is Play Date.
Exactly.
Okay.
I'm telling that story.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, this quilt deals with race relations. You see in this quilt, and I love black and white because nothing gets in between what you're trying to say. Okay, it's very stark and to the point. You see two adult women here. One's white, one's black. They're sitting on a park bench. They're there with their children. Each one has a child. These two women were best friends, even though they're of different races. And here they are, they have the second generation before them out there playing in the park, their children. And those children are playing together. And as I said, this quilt is a indirect statement about race relations, how I picture the world could possibly be.
Mm-hmm.
Children are innocent, and uh, they're taught to hate. They don't come packaged with hate. And these two children and their parents are good examples of that. So that's what Playdate is about.
Ah. Yeah, on the surface, one might say, oh, that's a
Right.
sweet story, until you
Exactly.
really look at it.
Exactly. And
Oh,
you know, too, that brings up another segue. This is why artist statements are important.
hmm.
Artist statements are important. I always include in my books the statements by artists. Early scholars didn't want to hear or didn't care what quilters had to say about their work. They interpreted the work themselves and interpreted why the quilters did what they did and the symbolism that the quilters were trying to impart to the viewers. And none of it was true because they
Hmm.
never had the input of the quilt maker.
Right.
So it's important to get those statements. um, I remember once I was at the Spencer Museum. I was outside of the auditorium waiting for my turn to go and give my lecture. And the lecturer, I could hear him outside, and he was talking about this quilter's work and all the symbolism in the quilt that related to Africa. And it was so intense and um, very deep in meaning. And I thought, well, my goodness, this quilter, I have to take a peek and look at this quilt because it must be just really extraordinary because the quilters put a lot of work into the symbolism of this quilt. And I opened the door to the lecture hall and I saw he was talking about my quilt. I had meant nothing, uh, none of the things that he said the quilt symbolized. That was not my intent. So, uh, ethically, that's wrong
Yeah.
to not include what quilters have to say. So, just wanted to point
That's a
that out.
powerful story.
These two young men are my eldest grandchildren. This is called I Am My Brother's Keeper. And the older brother is always taking care of the younger one. And I wanted to have a quilt to visualize him taking care always of his little brother. So that's that piece. I am my brother's keeper.
I love that. Ah,
This piece is called In the Spirit of Forgiveness. And actually, I made two of these quilts. This is the second one. And the first one is in a private collection. But it tells the story of Adrian Block, who used to be the Minister of Security in South Africa during apartheid and was responsible for the deaths of thousands of uh, Black South Africans. And after apartheid, when Desmond Tutu and others formed this reconciliation and forgiveness program, this man came forward and said that he wanted to come before that tribunal, and it was hard for people to believe, the Black South Africans, that he would do this. But anyway, he said, as to Tutu, as atonement for his sins, he wanted to wash the feet of some of the mothers and wives of sons and husbands that he had killed. And I thought that was a powerful statement. I think the most humbling thing one human being can do for another is to wash their feet. So I wanted to portray that act in a quilt.
I think a moment of silence to think about the just the weight, the emotional weight of this quilt.
Yes.
And how difficult forgiveness actually is, to ask for it.
Very difficult. And Block has spent his life doing good deeds for the children in South Africa by feeding the poor and helping educate them. So his life is now one of service. And again, we're talking forgiveness here.
Yeah.
And repent.
Yes. Okay.
This is one of my favorite quilts, and it's called Precious. It deals with a mother's love and relationship to her child. I made this quilt it's a celebratory ode to mothers, because I feel women are the most powerful people on earth, because they are the first teachers of all humanity. They're the most influential people on the planet. As first teachers of their children, they influence every human being on earth. And I wanted to show the power and the love of a mother, of a woman. I think especially young women forget the power that they have. They really do. Women don't usually, we don't start wars. We don't fight wars with bombs or bullets. I often say we have something much more powerful, a much more powerful tool, and that is the sword of our tongue, because what women have to say is very powerful. I've raised 3 sons, and I know words can bring them to their knees. Words are powerful, what we have to say. And I think the world will be much better when women can take their place, their rightful place in the world as leaders of people, because we have that capacity. We have that capacity.
We are certainly seeing that in the response in different countries right now.
Yes.
Women led versus
yes,
more patriarchal
Yes,
structures.
yes, yes.
Oh, I love this piece. But, you know, for me as a, you know, an admirer, a viewer, uh, what I am most impressed by in terms of your skill, your ability to convey emotional content just using black and white. We often think color is what evokes emotion. However, as you said, you strip that away to get to essence,
Essence.
the essence of the story, of the image, of the message.
Yes, yes.
This is so lush with the flowers and leaves. It's so lush without a single spot of color.
And I love flowers. And in most of my quilts, you'll see these radiating rings, and they're symbols of uh, life that's constantly evolving and being created. And I love flowers. Flowers for me are a life symbol. I love them. I can't grow them, but I love flowers. I admire other people's flowers. I put them in my quilts,
Mhm.
but I adore them. I adore them. Again, this is all three of my grandchildren, my grandsons, and they're playing a game of marbles. And as I said, I love to use my grandsons and my two granddaughters as models for my quilts. So this is a fun piece of them shooting marbles.
And there the rings again. I saw the rings in the earlier quilts. So I'm glad
Yes,
you said that that is
yes,
a motif that
yes,
finds its way into your work.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I think, you know, people watching this are going to have the question, how big are your quilts? How big do you
They're
usually work?
huge, they're big. This is maybe 7 feet long. Because I'm big, it's hard for me to work on small things. I can't do it. I just, I've never been able to do it. Early on, I had an agent that sold my work for about 15 years. And she would always tell me, Carolyn, make the quilts smaller because people can't hang them in their homes, And I made them smaller and for her, okay,
Mhm.
to satisfy her, and she could sell them in her gallery. But then she retired. When she retired, I went back to my same MO. I started making them big again. So
Mhm.
I like them because they're impactful and they make a statement. Yeah.
So the other technique question I have is, what is the technique?
Um, I draw.
Mhm.
I draw on paper. I draw on software. Um, all of these quilts are whole cloth quilts. I will make a TIFF or JPEG file and send it to a textile company and have the image printed on heavy cotton and get it back, and I enhance it with stenciling and um, paint sticks sometimes. It depends.
Mhm.
Ink, and then
Okay.
I will quilt it.
Wow. Do you quilt by machine or long arm? I mean, or hand?
I I I used to quilt by hand, but I'm very impatient, and hand quilting takes forever. But I did it for several years, and then I got a series of sewing machines. As quilt
Mhm.
makers, we never get enough sewing machines. We always want the latest sewing machines. So now I have regular sewing 3 regular sewing machines and a mid arm.
Ah, okay.
So yeah.
And you're working really big on a domestic machine, essentially. Wow,
Yeah, yeah.
that's
But the
impressive.
mid arm is really good because you can, all of this can, I can do it on a mid arm. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it's sufficient.
It's
But I would like to get a long arm. I don't know. I don't know if I'll get to that point or not. I don't know. It's just a thought.
and there's one more. I thought there was one more at least.
Yes, this is called Seeking Comfort, Finding Pain, and it deals with the comfort women. And during the war, Japan took a lot of, well, thousands of women from Korea and used them in so-called comfort houses. They used them really as sex slaves. And it's only been the last 3 years that Japan admitted that they had these comfort houses and apologized to the women and offered them restitution, even though now most of these women are dead, but it took decades to get this done. It was an issue that came before the United Nations, oh God, for the past 40 years.
Mhm.
So now it's been resolved, but those women suffered immense pain and indignity in these comfort houses. So this this quilt is about that episode in our world's history about the comfort women.
Right. And it's a story that has been repeated and repeated and continues to happen today.
Yes,
Whenever,
yes,
especially in
yes,
where there's war,
yes,
women
yes,
and children are
yes,
often made victims in this way.
yes, yes. Our own peacekeepers even, you know,
Mhm.
uh, commit crimes sometimes with
Right.
against the women and children that in countries where they've gone to keep the peace. So uh, women and children have been victims around the world of so many transgressions, so many crimes.
And I believe this is the last quilt.
This is called Wrapped in Love, and it shows 3 generations of African American women wrapped in a quilt. You see a daughter, her grandmother, and 2 little kids wrapped in the quilt. And when you think in terms of quilts, uh, everybody can relate to the cloth, and they see quilts as something to comfort and warm them. And it's a symbol of security. So I just wanted to make a quilt to celebrate quilts themselves. So
Mm.
there's this family wrapped in quilts, a quilt. And we as human beings have a lifelong relationship with cloth. It's
Yeah.
the first thing we're swathed in at birth. It's the last thing that touches our body upon our death. So you can't get away from the cloth. So this quilt celebrates a quilt, the quilt.
And I see the flowers again. And
Yeah.
I have seen this quilt in the past. This is the first time I noticed that there is a second child in it,
Yes.
peeking out there in the middle. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, you could write a novel about this image.
Yes.
There's so
Yes.
much in there. Oh my gosh.
And I like to include some little bit about our African heritage. So around this quilt, the border is cowrie shells.
Ah, I saw that in
Yes,
one of your other borders, I think.
yes,
Yes.
yes,
Mhm.
yes. So, cowrie shells were used uh, as money in
Mhm.
West Africa. So I just wanted to put that little touch of African
Mhm.
heritage in this quilt. So yes.
There we go again, the importance of the artist statement.
Exactly.
You have, of course, you have written, I think, 14 books, uh, but I think they've all been about everybody else's work. I mean, you've had work in them. When is your book coming out about your quilts?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that I'll live that long.
Ah,
Um, I don't know. I have no idea. But I've been asked that often, and maybe it'll come. Who knows?
so you mentioned that when we're all able to hopefully travel and be in groups again, you'll be going out to talk about the importance of legacy and documentation.
Yes.
And I remember you telling me years ago, label those quilts, Carol, label those quilts.
Yes. 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 It's very difficult to place quilts, but if you can't place the quilt in a museum collection, which is very difficult to do,
Mhm,
I think you owe it to yourself as maker and the quilt to place it somewhere where it's going to be appreciated and taken care of. So if you that's one of your charges, okay?
mhm,
If your family can't take them, then maybe sell them to
mhm,
someone that
mhm.
will take care of it
Care of it.
and cherish it, appreciate it.
Yeah. I was talking with a quilter today who she's the fourth generation to have custody of a quilt made by one of her great greats. And that is so precious. That is so
Yes,
precious.
yes.
So, what are your closing thoughts? What message would you like to end with for the folks watching this
Well, I
conversation?
keep saying that I'm going to retire. Every show I do, I say it's my last, especially at my age, but I'm really, I'm really this time working on my last show.
Mhm.
Knock, knock, Carol, I'm recalling. Um, I, and it's an important exhibition with an important museum,
Mhm.
and that show will not open until 2022. Um, but it will definitely be my last.
Mhm.
In in closing, I just want to talk about the importance of the quilts that we make in the African American community because the quilts are, as Roland Freeman used to put it, they're no less cultural documents. These are the quilts that tell our story, the story of our existence here in the United States, the existence of our families, our communities, and they're important because our stories are important. They're important to the canvas of what makes up America, and we are definitely a part of that canvas. So every quilt tells a story, and everything that we make is with merit. So we have to know that we're doing an important job. The quilt maker to me is similar to the West African griot. We are the keepers of the story. We are the keepers of the culture. And for those quilt makers, within the network. I just say we'll keep swinging that needle until we can't sew anymore,
Yeah.
to make the stories not only of our culture but the nation. So we'll continue.
Carolyn, thank you so much.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
thank you, thank you. Thank you for all that you've done. Uh, some acknowledged, and I do think sometimes not acknowledged. But
Thank you.
those of us who know how challenging your work is and how much you've given, we deeply appreciate it, and I hope you feel that. I hope you know that.
Thank
We're
you.
always
Thank you.
loving on you. I
Thank
mentioned
you.
I mentioned
Thank you.
some quilters. I said, oh, one of the people I'm going to interview is Carolyn Mazloomi, and they went, oh. So you are well loved. So,
Well, that's good to hear. That's good
well,
to hear.
those of you who are watching, there will be links where you can find all of Carolyn's books. I think most, if not all of them, are still in print. Most of them, hopefully. If
Most.
not, you can find them in, used bookstores for a lot of money, but they'll be worth it. They should be in your library as a real book. And there'll be a link, of course, to Carolyn's website, and you can reach her there. And when she's back out on the road, grab her while she's still talking to us, because one day she's going to say, that's it, I'm on my porch. But thank you again, and thank you to those who've been watching. Thanks so much, Carolyn.
You're
Peace and
welcome.
blessings to you every day.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.